Hello, my fellow Trollops. Back with you for the second part of the four-part read-along of the Eustace Diamonds by Anthony Trollope, his 1872 novel. This is a read-along that is hosted by Steve Donoghue over his channel, and I'll put a link to his channel in the description box below. This time we're doing chapters 21 to chapters 40, and this is Lizzie Eustace. She married Florian Eustace. He promptly died, but not before. Supposedly, she's lying. Giving him the Eustace Diamonds in perpetuity. She was lying about that. She's a liar. At the beginning of the book, it's like, oh, she's a liar. She's terrible. She's horrible. To help her, she's got her cousin, but also maybe a possible partner, Frank Greystock, to kind of bolster her case. She's also engaged to Lord Fawn, who is a kind of a cowardly, status obsessed but money poor lord who is desperately trying to pull himself out of this dumpster fire. Frank is torn between Lizzie and Lucy Morris, a poor governess, a shining beacon, a very nice, good character, and she continues to be nice and good in these sections. Now, as we left off, Lizzie was getting very kind of paranoid about the diamonds. I really kind of from the start of this book, I was expecting, it's like, okay, Lizzie, this is like the femme fatale. She marries a guy, he's going to die. Doesn't kill him, but she's grasping, she's clever. She's got all the kind of the moral swordness of a femme fatale in one of those 50s or 60s kind of 40s or 50s kind of a noir novel where she's she corrupt poor Frank into doing her dirty deeds, and there's some private detective would have to kind of come in. There's no private detectives, there's no murders, no heists. I'm very disappointed, Steve. What the heck? You were saying this is going to be a fun book. There's no politics in the book. Very politics-like, at least in this section. So yes. And as we open this section, there's very much something about Lizzie. She is crafty. She's always like a clever child, clever woman, but her cleverness hasn't gotten her anywhere. She's just led to her own misery, her graspingness. She's not a happy character, and there's in a sense of this book that Trollope is such a good writer that he's not content to just kind of paint her, as he does in the beginning, as a pretty terrible woman. And I mean, he doesn't kind of backpedal from, no, she's still terrible, but she's kind of complicated in her terribleness. Like, you can tell that she's sort of this woman in this, very kind of male dominated society who doesn't really, have the means, the education, the ways to kind of live a happy, kind of fulfilled life. And so, and he actually Trollope does a good job of doing that. Actually, there's some very funny bits in here at the beginning of chapters of the early chapters, the 20 to 40, where she's talking about, reading poetry and it being such a bother that you can't quote at the very beginning and you can't quote at the very end because people will just think that you've read only the beginning or the end. And it's like, these are booktuber anxieties. I can relate to this. It's like, oh man, I have to talk about chapter 30. Because if I only talk about chapter 20 and chapter 40, they'll just think I just read that and that was it. So, I feel for Lizzie there. I'm not sure entrapping some poor guy in a marriage he doesn't want. Indeed, that's not her ultimate goal at this point. Her ultimate goal at this point, as she says to Frank, is, yeah, I'm going to humble Lord Fawn. I'm going to make him come back to me on his knees. And when he says, oh, no, please be my wife, then I'm going to deny him, which is like, yeah. And this is the kind of the joys you get out of life. This is why you're so miserable. There's also, Frank in this book. Frank, who I believe actually Trollope does drop the hero word on him. There's this wonderful chapter. It's I call it, it's a sympathy for the devil. It's called Too Bad for Sympathy, which Steve was talking about, how are you reacting to the kind of intrusive narrator in this? Does it take you out of the story? It's like, actually, I think that's the bonus of Victorian literature, is you get the author, you get that narrator in there, and he tells you what's what. The narrator tells you what's what, and it's like it's another character in the book. And I find my enthusiasm for Victorian literature, I don't mind at all, because I mean, even contemporary literature, the people are like, oh, we're doing this smooth as glass narrative, and you can't really tell who the author is. It's like, it's bullshit. You can always, for the most part, I think you can always tell. You can feel the hand of the author on any of creations. They're there, even if they're not as bald faced to say. But there's the thing of, for Frank, it's like, well, Frank is like a morally complex character. He's somebody who's like, I should marry Lucy. I've made a promise to marry Lucy, but I'm ambitious and I want to go on the world. This might actually be the way I'll be happy. And actually, maybe I could, through my maleness, my powerfulness, which is a part of the way that Lizzie seduces him, I can make Lizzie into a good wife. I can bring her to order or whatever. And there's like, but why should but in this chapter 35 of Too Bad for Sympathy, he's like, but why should one tell the story of creatures so base one does not willingly grovel in the gutters or breathe fetid atmospheres or live in garbage? Which is like, well, that might be Victorian literature, though actually I would argue that even Victorian literature, especially I guess as we're going into thrillers, they did glory in the fetid, terrible, sordid details. It's like, give us the more sordid details, the better. And I mean, we're getting into this, this is the popularization of literature. This isn't just like high on the mountain literature. We're talking about the ideals and philosophical things. This is like the birth of Victorian novels are like the birth of sort of modern literature of this is, I can see why this is adapted for TV so well. And, other kind of Victorian novels are like, these are mini series. This is totally soap opera sort of stuff. But, and so has the reading world taught itself to like best the characters of all but divine men and women. Let the man who paints with pen and ink give the gaslight and flesh pots, the passions and pains, the prurient prudence, and the rouge pots and pounce boxes of the world as it is. And he will be told that no one can care a straw for his creations. With whom are we to sympathize, says the reader? Who not unnaturally imagines that a hero should be heroic? O thou, my reader, whose sympathies are in truth great, and my only aim of my work, when you have called the dearest of your friends round to your hospitable table, how many heroes are sitting there at the board? Which is like, I'm going to give you people that feel real. I'm going to give you, and Frank feels real. I mean, that's a thing of like, there's Lucy is kind of a shining thing. And I think he does a good job of making nuances, but all these pure characters, it's like pure evil characters, pure good characters. They don't resonate. You can't sink your things into them. You can't say, oh, I can see myself in Lizzie here of the anxieties about literature. And, oh, I can see Frank here of like, well, should I go with the kind of the poor, humble, very good woman, or should I go with the kind of the woman who's kind of turning on my power fantasies and actually somebody who can help me kind of further my own kind of like ambitions for power, for putting myself through into the world. So I am actually enjoying that part of the thing of like, yeah, it's like, oh, okay, actually they're doing like, after painting Lizzie so black, it's like, and Lucy is like the shining things, like Trollope's making a really good case for why Frank should be like, well, actually, you know what? Maybe Lizzie actually does make sense for me. Now we get into the whole thing of like Frank and Lizzie and how Lizzie is actually very good at playing the submissive female, and like, oh, that's how she ensnares him. She gets him with her wit. And I mean, there is the comment made in this book of like, she can get a man by craft, but she can't hold him the way that Lucy could hold him for her entire life effortlessly. It's like, yeah, you can get him for a while. Like you got Florian Eustace for a while, but he figured it out and died an unhappy man. Indeed, there's also that thing of like, well, if Frank can go into this clear-eyed, which all indications are not really, he's always giving Lizzie the benefit of the doubt. She's a good-looking woman. She's really good at playing on his kind of knightly sympathies and his kind of ambitions. But they're having their thing, and we get the wonderful scene of Andy Gowran, the Scottish steward of the Eustace Castle, and just and him going cousins, cousins. It's like catching them kissing, and strangely enough, it's another interruption in the last section. Lady Linlithgow interrupted the two, and it kind of it derailed that kind of like, oh, Frank was going to propose to her there. Then this one has the opposite effect of it somewhat forcing them together. It's more like, oh, well, Frank's kind of like more forced to kind of along that line to like, oh, I'm hooking myself up more with the Lizzie. And meanwhile, we have poor Lucy who because Frank and Lord Fawn are battling. Lord Fawn, of course, comes to the Fawn women's table and starts bad-mouthing Frank right in front of Lucy, who of course has to say, no, you're wrong, you're mistaken, you're that's a lie, that he's not a gentleman. And of course, this being it's like, this is the thing of, he is the male head of the family, and you cannot contradict the male head of the family. This is a world where women aren't allowed those opinions, at least not the women that are all subjugated under someone who is as useless and as status obsessed. And he admittedly, Trollope does a good job of saying, like, well, he's somebody who's worried about his entire status. That's all he has is his status. He doesn't have any money. He's worried about his status getting drawn through the mud by this whole entanglement with Lizzie, and Lizzie is more than knows that she has that power. And so when he gets a governess sort of bad mouthing him, contradicting him at his own table, he won't put aside. So Lucy ends up having to move off with Lady Linlithgow, who I love. Lady Linlithgow is just like, she's very clear. It's like, look, honey, he is poor. He's going to find somebody rich to marry. Why would he marry you? And if he is, it's not going to happen for a long time. And why did they send you to me? Why did they take you into the family home? That says there's something going on, that your situation isn't clear. She nails it, just very clear-eyed. So there's that with that Linlithgow. There's Mr. Dove, who is the legal expert that the Eustace family lawyer, Mr. Camperdown, comes to consult. And if I don't get politics in this section, at least I get a great explainer on the law. Mr. Dove does this wonderful kind of explanation of kind of hereditary law, which I'm sure you're like, why is this dude so interested in hereditary law? He was so interested in parliamentary politics and in Phineas Finn. Now he's gushing about that. But it's like, Trollope, I have to give him my highest compliment. He is such a good explainer. He could be a science fiction writer, which there's a certain kind of science fiction writer. This is my area of expertise. Maybe you could also say this is like a techno thriller writer, those Clancy books or stuff like that, where it's just exposition of like explaining some kind of complicated process and making it entertaining and making that the draw. Neil Stephenson is a really good example of that, when he wasn't so completely bloated out, with someone who's like, he could entertain you by explaining what would be considered like very dry ideas, but doing it in a science fiction book. And the info dump, the art of the info dump, it's a plus at the info dump. And indeed, it's a small section, but Mr. Dove does a lovely info dump on the legal system and on heirlooms in particular, which I really enjoyed. This is like, the romance, whatever, but legal talk about heirlooms and stuff like that was actually really good. And now in the final sections of this book, let me quickly get to that. We get this whole thing of Lizzie's guests. They go to they're off at Lizzie's Scottish castle, Eustace castle, and suddenly we get introduced to these four guests: Miss Carbuncle, Miss Roanoke, Lord George de Bruce Carruthers, and Sir Griffin Tewett. Which this might be another crossover thing where I haven't read the very first book in the Palliser series, the parliamentary novels. So maybe they indeed show up there, and this is a reintroduction. Though they're given these very long introductions, like, oh God, here are four more major characters in the center of this book. And I have to say, I was kind of frustrated. It's just like, really, are we going to get to? We've gotten halfway into the book, and now you're introducing four more characters. And indeed, this becomes this little thing of these four guests who all seem to be kind of spongers in their way. None of them have any money, and they're quite happily sucking up Lizzie's money. Lizzie's kind of realizing, I'm a rich woman, but this is costing me a lot of money. But so they come there, and of course, because it's a Trollope novel, as Steve has warned us, we get another fox hunt. Oh boy, another barbaric thing of hunting down some poor defenseless animal. No horses get killed in this book, and Phineas Finn, one of the heroes or whatever's, kills a horse. But so yeah, no horses die in this one that I know of. But the horse is stolen. But yeah. So a fox gets killed. Now, of course, who in this novel has been called a vixen all through the novel? It is Lizzie Eustace, and she's called a vixen, which is a female fox. It seems to be male foxes that seem to be getting hunted down here. And when they kill the fox and they chop off its tail and they present it as it's called a comb, they present it to Lizzie, which is like, I wonder. It's a whole bunch of men pursuing a fox, which basically has no chance. Killing it and then chopping off its tail as the trophy. I have a feel. I don't know if Trollope was intentionally going for any symbolism there, but in a book that's all about pursuing, will I pursue the rich woman for her money, or will I marry the poor woman for her purity? It's like there's a hunting metaphor there. As I said, like in the last novel, there was the whole thing about Violet Effingham taking the plunge, taking the jump, and that Lord Chiltern, the horse killer, had indeed taken a jump with a horse and killed the horse because he had failed. The jump had failed. So I don't know, but yeah, I was rather frustrated by this end part here, just because I felt like suddenly Screech. Oh God, are we starting a whole new novel here? I'm still. I guess I think I've resigned myself that this is not going to turn into some kind of a 50s, 40s pulpy noir novel where someone's going to get bumped off, or there's going to be a heist or a fake heist and the jewels are going to go missing. I think we're going to keep on hashing it out between Lizzie, Lucy, but for Frank, who does actually get called the hero ends up getting called the hero of the book. Where is it? Our hero, Frank Greystock, falling lamentably short in his heroism, was not in a happy state of mind when he reached Bobbensborough. So after saying, we're not going to see our hero for a while, it's like, now we've got our hero in here. Frank is suddenly the hero. Is he going to be the hero? I mean, in some ways I can see him being the hero. He's a fellow who is getting torn between some very kind of compelling reasons to do something, either to marry what's a good but poor woman, or to marry a terrible, vain, grasping, crafty, clever woman who in the fox hunt, of course, looking back on her memories of like, this was fun. It's like, well, I got to ride with the Corsair, which is Lord George. It's like, yes, because she's totally into Byron. There's a Madame Bovary thing here happening, I think, she reads Byron and she's getting all this kind of romantic, bad, mad, and dangerous to know kind of stuff. It's like she's projecting that on somebody like Lord George, who's not any case of a Byron, but he's like a physically strong man, and that you kind of get that female kind of, hey, you're hot kind of a vibe out of the thing. But does he marry someone like that and quote tame her, or attempt to tame her and turn her into a good woman? So I guess we're gonna go through more of that. That's my guess. I like doing these read-alongs because it's very much, these books were serialized as they came out, and as I can see it as like a weekly show that you would kind of get new episodes of. I can see that new issues of the magazine that it was published in, and you'd read up to a certain point, and then you'd spend your time speculating until the next one came out and talking with it with all your friends, which is indeed what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go sign off and go see what my booktube friend Steve Donoghue had to say about that. I recommend that you do the same if you're at all into the Trollope stuff, which, let's face it, if you've listened to me natter for this long, you're probably into Trollope, I have to assume. All right, more videos later.